Shall we?
2 minutes. It's at 35.
Okay.
Anyway, it's up to you.
I don't know, I think. Good afternoon, everyone. We have some free seats here in the front, second row, third row. If you guys standing would like to join us, join in the audience. So good afternoon. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome you to the Social Innovation House here in Davos in 2025. I'd like to thank our hosts from Catalyst who helped us put this Mental Health Day together. And I would like to also thank our co-hosts, the Real Mental Healthcare Foundation, Sean and Heather. If you're here, then big thank you. My name is Pascal Joncourt. I'm a partner at Convergence Partners, and I'm also a co-host of this day. It's a great honor and privilege to see so many of you interested in what we're going to talk about next. We're going to talk about the golden age of technology and how new modalities, new technologies, new ways to approach traditional diseases in brain and mental health are totally revolutionizing the way and the approach in terms we can be more precise, we can be more predictive, and we can be more personalized. And I will be joined by a fantastic panel that will introduce themselves in a second. We'll talk for roughly 20-25 minutes, and then I'd love to open the floor for some questions for you guys to ask my fantastic experts. So may I greet you all. Thank you for being here today for this fantastic panel. And maybe, Margaret, if you could start 1 minute each. Why are you here, who you are?
Lovely, thank you. My name is Margaret Maher. I'm with Crisis Text Line. And why I'm here, what we do is something very simple but powerful. Our organization offers a free, confidential, 24/7 crisis response line for anyone in need anywhere. So essentially, anyone who's having a crisis of any sort, we're here to respond to them and support them. We're powered by a whole host of volunteers who have been trained by our organization and or through the partners that we work with, including Kids Help Phone, who just participated in the last panel. And we essentially, in our model, have two interventions. One of those interventions is meeting the person in crisis in the moment of their need, whenever and wherever they are, with an effective and appropriate response that helps them come back to a moment of calm and have a plan for safety and someone to turn to and what to do next beyond the conversation. The second intervention is the training of our volunteers themselves and what happens to them, their families, their communities, and society as a result of that training and how that cascades well-being. Today I'll be talking really only about what we do with AI in the text-based part of the conversation.
Thank you, Margaret. Welcome. Adam.
Thank you very much for inviting us today. My name is Adam Hanina. I'm the CEO of Dandelion Science. And I'm here because this is a mission we're exploring to understand if there's a programming language for the brain. Because if you can uncover that, you could probably deliver many different types of therapies that will ultimately fill many unmet needs. In the same way that there's a genetic code which consists of DNA and RNA and CRISPR tools that allow us to now deliver new types of therapies for our human hardware, we believe that there's a brain code that you can start to break down the Lego blocks of thought and use those to deliver new types of therapy for both brain disorders and vision disorders. And that's what we're doing at Dandelion Science. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Erwin, welcome.
Yes, how are you all doing? Good, okay. I would like to invite you for the next hour or so to think about how we can solve the problems of mental health and neurologic disability and mental health at the moment together to solve the problems that we have now and shape a vision for the future where we enable every individual with neurologic or mental health disorders to live life to the fullest of their potential. This is our vision. This is the vision of the Wyss Center for Bio and Neuroengineering in Geneva, here in beautiful Switzerland. A word to myself. I'm Erwin Badic. I'm a professor for artificial intelligence and human health at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York City. Spent 30 years of my adult academic and entrepreneurial life in the US. I'm happy to be now here in Switzerland and push the boundaries of what technology and engineering and AI, data science can bring us in terms of achieving the vision that I stated. We are working on the problem where the brain is fully capable to initiate thoughts, to initiate speech, to initiate mobility, and any other thing, but the body doesn't respond. I'm talking about those individuals with severe neurologic disorders, such as brainstem stroke, ALS, stroke in general, paralysis, and so on. We are, at this moment, in the process of spinning out a huge project at the Wyss Center we call Ability Neurotech. It can be looked up under abilityneuro.com. There's a brain-computer interface technology. This reconnects the brain with speech, with mobility, movement, and any other thing you want it connected to. Brain-computer interface technology. I'm sure we'll get into more detail about that. This is obviously an invasive technology. This is deep tech, so we are very excited about this. The second aspect of what we do is we need to be able to help individuals with mental health disorders in optimizing how they perceive their feelings, their emotion, and their capacity and capability in going through their day. And for that, we're working on AI-guided, non-invasive neuromodulation technologies such as electrical, magnetic, and ultrasound stimulation. We envision that these technologies that are often currently still researchy, clunky, and not for use at home, we will change that. We will change that game. We will make these technologies usable for the individual in their home. And so that, I think, will be then our contribution to solving mental health problems in populations.
Thank you, Erwin. I'd like to start with you, Margaret, and to look at one of the use cases at Crisis TextLine. You've been exploring nearly 10 million conversations about mental health crisis, and you've been leveraging AI, machine learning, natural language processing. So I wondered if you could give us an insight on how you approach this and what the key findings have been.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. Thanks for asking. But, as you mentioned, we've supported nearly 11 million crisis conversations over the last 11 years in the U.S. alone, and over 14 million worldwide. Those conversations are the voices of people in pain who need support. So we essentially are using natural language processing, machine learning, and AI to do a few things with those conversations. First is, what are the core problems that are driving them to the point of duress that they're reaching out to us for? Second is, what resources do they need and how can we best support them through the conversation and beyond? And third is to shed light on trends and rapid changes in the field. We have real-time data. How can we understand that quickly and share insights with the field? I'll share a couple of very quick examples of specific examples of things we're working on that we can share in learning. The first is, in terms of the factors that are associated with an effective conversation for someone in a crisis, we've run analyses on hundreds of factors that could come up in a conversation and identified the most powerful one is whether the responder conveys a sense of genuine concern to the person in crisis. That has clinical significant meaning. So then we used machine learning to look at, can we measure that and identify it? What does it look like in a conversation in a digital context? The answer was yes. So then we looked at what's the magnitude of that difference? How important is it really? We found that it's a 10-fold likelihood that that conversation will be helpful to the person in crisis if genuine concern is conveyed. And for someone who presents with suicidal ideation, a 5-fold reduction in their suicidal ideation in the 45-minute text-based conversation. So it's a powerful thing. We've just published an article on that. We're sharing that with the field, and we're using those findings to improve our training. Another thing that we're working on is in collaboration with the CDC on suicide reduction. One of the most important things that you can do to reduce suicide is to remove the means of suicide. So again, using NLP, going into the conversation to identify intended means of suicide Can we measure that? Yes, we can. Now, what do we do with that? And what did we learn? We've discovered that we're finding a developmental evolution of intended means of suicide that varies by different population demographic, particularly gender, male, female, or LGBTQ identifying. So by May, we will be producing a public health suicide prevention dashboard that will be available not to the public, but to those who are working on suicide prevention, to share not only the common and frequent means of intended means, but also the emerging, like rare but rapidly growing, so that we'll have early warning signs of what's happening across populations and demographics. And we'll be able to replicate this as we are expanding globally across languages and cultures where we're working.
Thank you, Margaret. That's amazing progress, and we'll deep dive into it later on again. I'd like to ask Erwin, in terms of the fascinating new science and modalities that apply to neurosciences that you are researching and developing at the V Center. Could you give us, in a nutshell, the overview of where we stand and what are going to be the most exciting breakthroughs that you expect?
Sure, Pascal, but before I get there, I would like to congratulate Margaret on this is such important work and is so immediately impactful, right? Whereas, we are working on things, technologies that have to go through all the regulatory approvals in various continents with different rules and so on, and data protection, privacy protection, risk-benefit ratios, and all these considerations, and then convince FDA or EMEA that yes, this is safe and good for people to use with problems. You're having an immediate impact, and I would like to congratulate you on that. From the technology perspective, we are currently obviously very, very deep engaged at the V Center, which is a not-for-profit organization, independent in Geneva, with many, many super talented engineers and AI experts in the brain-computer interface technology. I'm sure all of you have heard about Neuralink and Elon Musk and what he's pushing there. This is very good. This is bringing a lot of awareness, a lot of attention, and also, frankly, a lot of money to the field. But what we're doing is we're taking a very different approach than the other actors in that theater. We are thinking about brain-computer interface technology in the first instance in terms of getting approvals to solve the major problems of people with ALS, for instance, and other neurologic deficits in a clinical care context by connecting what they think, what they want to say, their speech intention with the computer and having an expression of their speech. And this is by now with the technology actually almost real-time speech with about 100 words per minute. And so this is actually phenomenal what the technology can achieve. And beyond into mobility, use of arm, etc., and so on. This is a technology that now seems to be, wow, it is really big deal for the patient. But I mind you, so what we actually do is we place electrodes on top of brain regions of the brain that are linked and well known in neuroscience to be responsible for certain activities, moving the arm, the muscles of the mouth and voice box to speak, and so on. We know exactly where they are, where these areas are in the brain. We can place electrodes there, and we can have through wires, through a small burr hole in the skull, in the bone actually, connect this to a device that sits outside of the skull. And that transmits real-time broadband electrical activity. And so we envision this not only to be re-establishing the connection between brain and body in the future. And I was this morning at a panel where I was asked, so what do you think BCI will look like in 2050? Want to hear my answer?
Please do. I had that question later on.
Okay, in 10 seconds. I think in 2050, this will be a very widely used diagnostic tool to understand what the brain is actually doing when we are taking, when we are giving medications, when there are severe problems of mental health and other disorders. And we currently have imaging technologies and scales asking people how they feel when they got up, how they felt, and so on and so forth. This is all good, but this is the 21st century, and with the technology we are pushing forward, I think we'll make a quantum leap to really understand what's happening in mental health and neurologic deficits.
Thank you, Erwin. I'd like to ask Adam in terms of leveraging Gen AI at Dandelion. And my understanding is you're working on decoding the language of the brain. Is this the new frontier? And can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to condense it, but we're here because of impact. You know, I've experienced a lot of clinical development using pharmacological approaches. And if you ask any of the senior scientists involved in the pharmaceutical industry, which currently makes over $130 billion a year for products to treat the brain, very few of them can actually explain the mechanisms of action. And so if you think of the brain as a combination of hardware and software, really to understand disease, whether it's neurological, neurodegenerative, or neuropsychiatric, you have to understand how it affects the software that occurs in the brain. And the software, these dynamics or lightning storms that occur in the brain, are very complex. And in order to speak the language of the brain, you need inputs that are also very complex. So what we're doing is we're using generative AI to develop these very complex stimulation inputs. We're actually agnostic to input. We believe that we can combine with incredible technologies that the V Center is developing or even pharmacological approaches to enhance these methodologies. But we're focused on the software language. And if we can explore the space of dynamics, the things that happen in the brain, efficiently, we believe that we can actually start to drive very, very specific precision therapeutics for brain and vision disorders in a much, much more efficient way. And that's the platform that we're building. It's really to create an end-to-end platform where you don't just take a chemical and you throw it at a disease and have a 10-year development cycle. What you do first is you probe the brain to understand how the pathways or the traffic jams occur, and then you see if you can reroute past the traffic jams. So.
Thanks, Adam, and we'll deep dive further into Dandelion. It's a fascinating topic, but we talk about tech, and Margaret, I'd like to also ask you the question. You work with a lot of volunteers at Crisis Text Line, and obviously, what is your take on the human factor moving forwards and how AI and tech can augment their input and the way you work? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, well, thank you. Great question. And I think it's pretty clear that AI is not going away. So in our case, we're really focusing on optimizing the use of AI and machine learning and all of those amazing tools to really focus on helping human beings connect with, relate to, and support each other better, faster, and more effectively. And how we do that really is keeping humans on the front line as responders, taking everyday people and turning them into superhumans, to help somebody with the competency and capability to help them in a moment, and as clinical staff supporting them. All of our volunteers and all the conversations are supported with we take a small number of supervisors clinically trained on staff. I'll give you an example. In the US, we've got 220 staff in our organization. We're a nonprofit. 70 to 80 of those are clinical staff. They support a bank of 16,000 volunteers who were active last year. Those 16,000 volunteers and 80 clinical supervisors supported 1.4 million crisis conversations in every state and every county in the country. So humans at every level in that operation, and then humans in the loop in our research and in our analytics, analyzing, evaluating our models, as well as assessing for bias and risk on an ongoing basis. And one thing we don't do is we don't port our data into external generative AI engines. We keep it in our own containers and keep it separate from the rest of the world so that we build our own models in-house. That is sacred to us, and that really is about the human voice that we're protecting within it.
Yes, congratulations. It's really very impressive, and thank you to all the volunteers and who are involved. And as you said, AI is here to stay, but those volunteers do a tremendous work. If we can help and enhance through AI their impact, that's a massive added value. Erwin, next question. You came back from JPM. You presented the BCI technology that you just alluded to. Either you give us a further insight on what it looks like in 2100, or you pick another amazing modality that you currently look at the V Center that is maybe a little bit more early stage?
Well, in fact, the BCI technology at the V Center is the first, probably, of a number of technologies that we are spinning out and putting through for clinical development. It's one of the first that's going out. In fact, we have a first in human with the technology in the second half of the year. And as I said, the startup is being formed, Ability Neurotech. And then after first in human, obviously, there's a massive need of capital for the startup to go through clinical development, which needs to be very rigorous, appropriately so. But we have partners in the US, we have partners at Texas Medical Center, UT Health System, and other places to go forward in the US for approval by FDA. That's the plan. Other technologies, very, very exciting. One, I have to say, we are really big on what Adam is doing with Dandelion. And in fact, we're working closely together. I do believe sort of the concept of using the eye as so an entry point to affect 80%, essentially, that's the estimate, of neural circuits. It's not just that, the visual pathway is ending up in some corner in the back of the brain. It really is modulated through multiple circuitry affecting all areas of the brain. And so we're very excited about that technology, and we're supporting it to the best of our ability. But we're also excited, in fact, by the work that Friedhelm Hummel, professor at the EPFL in Lausanne, and the colleagues at the HUC Hôpital Universitaire Genevois in Geneva are doing, where they are leveraging the electrical stimulation technology, temporal transcranial interference stimulation, that is researchy at this time, but already applied in humans, in particular to promote recovery, motor recovery after stroke with neurological disability, basically paralysis, and they have phenomenal results that this non-invasive stimulation, when applied together with targeted physiotherapy, is enhancing the formation of new memory for mobility. And so we're very excited about this technology. And we have one other cool thing that I can't miss. And this is something that you probably would never think about. And that addresses the gut-brain axis. Although there were colleagues from France who this morning talked about PBM, we are just at the very beginning to understand the functional role and the contribution to actual mental health and neurologic conditions of the enteric nervous system. And so we have a wonderful, talented investigator at the Wyss Center, Michalina Gora, who's going around becoming very quickly a superstar in the photonics field, going around the world. In fact, she's at SPIE in California as we speak. So what we're doing there is we're coupling endoscopy. This is what you know from your GI doctor, with the ability to record the nervous activity in the gut, and also in the second phase to stimulate and modulate the enteric nervous system. And so we are very bullish on this because, as you know, probably there's now in Parkinson's the emergence of a type of Parkinson's. It's like type 1, type 2 diabetes, literally, where it starts first in the brain, and then there's a type of Parkinson's that seems to start first in the gut. So these are just some examples of the fascinating new initiatives that are coming forward, and we certainly will be part of that.
Thanks, Erwin, and we look forward to hearing much more about this in the future. I learned a new term of a new therapy, the generative neuromodulation therapy you're working on, Adam. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more also with regards to the challenges to adoption and how you approach this moving forwards as a standalone or as a complementary therapy to the existing therapies and then the modalities out there.
Yeah, so thank you. So firstly, in order to solve or have an impact, we believe that you not only have to develop specific indication approaches, but you have to build an advanced platform. That's why we're grateful to the Beast Center for acting as co-development partner in that and helping to accelerate in that process. There's no other foundation around the world that can really help accelerate neuroengineering in that way. So we are very grateful for the relationship. Thank you. The approach we're taking is, as Owen, Dr. Bottinger alluded to, is using the eye as an initial entry point. And the reason why is because if you want something to be scalable and have an impact around the planet, 1 in 3 people suffer from a neurodegenerative, neurological, neuropsychiatric condition. You have to make it scalable. And so our thought process is, in the same way that you take a pill in a package, we believe that we should be able to deliver therapies on any electronic screen. However, in order to create those types of stimulatory therapies, you need a very advanced platform to be able to search the brain space in order to understand what's an effective mechanism to deliver therapies. And that's a very, very complex thing to do. And that's why you need development partners. So that's exactly what we're doing. In fact, if you think about all the different technologies out there in neurotech, it's really a search for bandwidth, access to the brain. You have lower bandwidth, could be considered pharmacological approaches, and then you have energy-driven types of stimulation, which are like electrical or focused ultrasound or magnetic. You have brain-computer interfaces that are getting to about 1,024 channels in the brain, which is already good. And what we're trying to leverage is the 1 million ganglion cells in each eye that are then hardwired to the visual cortex, which is about a quarter of the brain. And then that gives you full brain access, because the way the brain computes information is as a system. It's entirely interconnected. So the questions we're asking are, can we actually start to have an impact there?
Thanks, Adam. And talking about generative AI, Margaret, have you started thinking about how that could apply into a more precise, accurate diagnosis, for instance? What's your take on generative?
Yes, and thank you for leading that space and for working in that. In our case, we don't do any diagnosis. That isn't a realm that we expect to stay in, but where we expect to be able to continue to use AI and machine learning is to understand with greater nuance what really are the issues that are driving someone to stress and duress and to reach out to us in crisis. And I'll give an example where within the next 6 months or so, we have a model emerging that the way that we've coded our data over time in the conversations is the volunteers at the end of the conversation will code and tell us what the conversation was about. And imprecise inter-rater reliability, but still better than most anywhere in the world, right? We're now able to use AI stethoscope style to listen to the conversation and get much more precise about what is really happening. And so, for example, if you can imagine 2 tick boxes of a code, relationship and other might be something that we see, we now can translate that into a very nuanced list of 40 different things and draw out that it's a partner's alcoholism and some other, I lost my job, right? And now we can get at, so what do we do with that information at systems level, community levels? Are there patterns? So that's how we're able to go really in and listen to the data.
Which means, Erwin, question about that precision and personalized approach. Are we finally entering that area of medicine with those new modalities?
Oh, you're asking the wrong guy here. I was, during my tenure at Mount Sinai in the US, very bullish. You remember about a quarter of a century ago, we witnessed Bill Clinton and Francis Collins and Craig Venter waltz into the White House press room and announced the completion of the human genome. And in fact, at that time, people said in 10 years, we understand every disease and we have therapies for every disease. And so it will be game over for the bad disease. So we had the war on cancer and all these things, right? And, that was announced, I believe, in the 70s or something. And there were NIH directors that are known to say, quote, in 15 years we'll end all pain and suffering from disease and all of that. So I'm very cautious with these predictions. But One thing is for sure. We have learned a lot from analyzing clinical documentation in electronic health records and analyzing that to the deepest, linking that information with genomic information, and we've made much progress. A lot of progress has been made in terms of personalized medicine with pharmacogenomics, because indeed there's super evidence that genetic markers in your genome predict what medication you should not take or what medication you should take at what dose. So this pharmacogenomics, this evidence has been around for 20 years. At the scientific level, it's rock solid. There are guidelines from physician associations and so on, but it's not making its way into clinical practice. Don't ask me why. I would get probably very critical of the healthcare system at large. They are just very resistant to change. Pharmacogenomics is an example. But I'm very optimistic that with new data that is outside of the clinical documentation scheme, such as streaming data, such as the data that Margaret and the teams are collecting, data out of daily life of individuals, we will be much more precise in understanding what's going on. In psychiatry, we have diagnoses, right, DSM, but the new thinking is that there are trans-diagnostic problems like apathy, right, goes from Parkinson's to severe depression. And so we need to think much more in those, daily findings in the lives of individuals that give us much more insight as to what's going on with the individual. From that perspective, I'm very optimistic.
Thank you, Erwin. One last question to Adam before we open up for some questions in the audience. So get ready for your questions. But I'm interested, Adam, like we're looking at decoding the language of the brain. And we're humans, and we're defined by our consciousness. Is this going to be the next frontier to look into, like impacting or getting in touch with our consciousness, or what is your take on this?
Yeah, and so I would actually echo Dr. Böttinger's sentiment that I actually think things are progressing very rapidly. And if you think a few years ago about OpenAI as a small research group, what they've been able to do, they've been effectively able to turn magic into reality today. And that's something that we're striving to do as well, which is take a computational approach to collecting as much data. In fact, we believe that you can take advanced AI methodologies and then apply them to neuroscience to have very meaningful effect. But indeed, I think it will start to inform as we learn more about how our brains work. And just a note, our brains, still human beings have the advantage. We're 10,000 times more efficient in compute than the leading NVIDIA microchips on the planet. And so we still have the advantage, but that means that there's a huge opportunity economically to start informing next generation AI development as we learn more about the efficiencies of the brain. And so there's this incredible convergence between AI coming to neuro, but then neuro then coming back to AI in a full circle.
Thank you, Adam. I think this is pretty impressive content and breakthrough and a glimpse of what will come in the future. I bet many of you have questions, so open up the floor. And I'll pass the mic, or Nick. Thank you.
So many questions I would like to ask.
We have 10 minutes for Q&A.
I will just ask one. Dr. Böttinger, you mentioned genetic markers. Is this technology currently available to the general public? And if so, where does one go to access it, to identify medications that one should be taking and not taking?
Well, the information is available to the public. There's the Pharmacogenomic Research Network. If you go and look up PGRN, and they have a wonderful web resource where you can really look up, if you actually have a sequence of your genome, right? You can match it to, what your response or response to certain medications is. So these databases are available. Typically, you need to have genetic testing, and the probably most well-known entity where genetic testing is accessible to the public, to consumers, is 23andMe in the US, where you have, known genetic markers tested in your genome and then interpreted in a way to either express the risk of disease development or the response to medication. Yes, it is available without needing to go to the doctor.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My question is for everyone and anyone of you who would like to take it. When you consider the population, when you consider the data sets for all the neurological tests as well as the crisis text line or whatever innovations are happening, do you consider diversity of populations? Because every population may have different reasons of being affected due to mental health, and also when it comes to gut health, the physiology of everybody is different based on where they come from. So is that being considered? And how do you see it going in the next few years?
If it's okay, I'll start.
Please, Margaret.
Thank you so much for asking that question. Our crisis text lines population that we serve is highly diverse. And we serve demographics that identify themselves in multiple and complex ways. They share their identities. Those who feel comfortable at the end of the conversation give us very nuanced information about who they are, how they identify, and all of those factors are taken into consideration in our analyses. So when I talked about, for example, the suicide means detection, we're going to be able to speak to that by those demographics. Okay, that's also part of why we don't use generative AI. It doesn't represent the diverse populations that we are holding the experiences of, and then thirdly, we also work across languages, and our training is culturally grounded and localized and nuanced as we go from one location to another, and so that for us is very important. And one of the things that we have been doing is watching whether the effects of the effectiveness of the conversation for the texters who are diverse. Are we seeing universally similar positive effects in the support and services? And we're watching for that across demographics on a constant basis. The answer is yes. So we have, and there's some publications out there that of external evaluations that can help explain that, and I'm happy to share. And we have those on our website. Sometimes they're hard to find, so I'm happy to point you to them. And then with respect to our the volunteers themselves, also quite diverse, and we're really attracting a diverse set of populations using our service and joining us to be part of the solution.
Thank you, Margaret. Questions?
Yeah. Hello, and thank you for addressing such an important subject. I come from traditional medicines, from indigenous training, and so my question is kind of somewhere between the indigenous and the meditation of the world, and how it's traditionally been used to precisely work on the brain. And now we're having more research on how meditation, for example, helps to reduce the frontal and go into the pineal and all of this stuff. Any of you would like to answer if you're incorporating some of these methodologies into the research or the collection of the data or the new therapies that you are constructing? Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing this up, because certainly we perhaps most of us have experienced the power of meditation or yoga in setting us straight for the day, or correcting what went off during the day at the end of the day. And so the explanations are often in practices, long-held practices in the respective cultures where they come from. We certainly are aware, and we would like to promote the understanding of the benefit of these practices as much as we can. And, this is something that we are not actively, directly engaging in, but, we, as much as we can, will bring into the conversation about technology that we can then bring together with other methodologies, meditation, yoga, to actually optimize how you feel. I mean, in the end, it's about optimize how you feel, and certainly help those that are sort of in a spiral of negative symptoms and other problems associated with mental health to, rewind and come out of that. I think in the end, you are absolutely right. I am a firm believer that the approach that will help most people will be multimodal, and it will be high tech and methods from indigenous and traditional medicines.
Thank you.
We have time for like 2 quick more questions, one here and one.
I'll be very quick. I just wanted to ask Adam. It was amazing, yes. And I don't have time to tell you how amazed I am. Did I understand correctly that you are trying to replace a pill, which we could swallow, with a projection on a screen? It's like a digital pill for mental health, and it can be maybe used. I'm an AI also person, like a digital twin, and then, okay, we come back to the human. Is this?
Yes. So that's exactly right. So
Yes.
I use the pill analogy because I'm a big believer in order to have impact, you have to have scale. And delivery methodology of the therapy is as important as the way you identify the therapy. There was a question earlier about, science today ends up averaging a lot of things. So you come up with averages of pharmacological products. Genders are often ignored. Subtypes are often ignored. Age is often ignored. We feel that there's a little bit of both, actually. As Dr. Boettinger said, technology will enable personalization, but our goal as a company is to look for generalizability, because we believe that ultimately our operating systems are actually quite similar. And if you look at visual processing, for example, we all see things in very similar ways. So the software is architected in a way where there's a lot of similarity. So in order to be able to have the highest amount of impact, you really need to look for that generalizability. We call it the Tylenol effect. We know most people will be affected in the same way by Tylenol. And really what we're trying to develop are pharmacological grade effects using non-invasive methodologies.
One last question, Jack.
Do you think that the brain-gut axis will be, in the years to come, one of the major targets for the treatment of a neurological disease? In other words, I could say, if you want to treat my brain, treat my gut.
Well, we're invested in that.
On that note, thank you very much, dear panel. Thank you to the audience for your participation. Amazing conversation. My panelists will be available after the break if you'd like to carry on discussing. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Please feel free to use the second floor lounge for conversation, and we will begin the next session at 5:25.